So my name is Zac Wolf. As you see, I'm here, and I'm really, really excited to give my first Creative Mornings talk. We've been a part, like I said, part of Creative Mornings for a really long time. I've never given a talk, for this, and I saw that punk was coming up as one of the topics, and I was like, let me try. Let me throw my hat in the ring, and he said yes, which we'll see if that was a good idea, but I'm really here to talk about something that is very important to me and kind of just like gave me everything that I have. So first, here's me at 13 years old. So picture a 13-year-old kind of like wandering around a South Florida mall. For those of you from South Florida, the Town Center Mall. It was 2000 something, I don't want to age myself. And I was probably wearing like a funny t-shirt and cargo shorts. It was a time in my life that my parents were going through like a really messy divorce. Tons of people have gone through that, addiction, illness, a whole catastrophe. And at that point in my life, I kind of felt invisible and lost. And then I'm wandering through this mall, I'm a young kid, and I walk into a CD store and I see this compilation right here. And I'm like, that looks cool. That is a cool cover. And I pick it up and I look, and the bands have cool names. And that's literally how I heard punk rock for the first time. So I was that lost, dorky 13-year-old that we talked about, and I go on a middle school field trip. I'd started getting into punk a little bit. I'm wearing an Anti-Flag shirt, for those of you who know. And the son of my middle school librarian was there, and he comes up to me, he goes, "Do you like Anti-Flag?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course." And he was like, "Oh, do you want to come see my band this weekend?" And I went, and had never been to any kind of the only other concert I'd been to was Smash Mouth, and that was in 5th grade. So I should go to the show alone, and I'm nervous, and I didn't really know like what to expect from it, what the vibe was going to be. I had all these like predisposed ideas, but what it actually meant was 13-year-old Zach standing in the back of a VFW hall. It reeks of cigarettes and beer. The PA system, the mics, everything was kind of like literally duct taped together. And I have a very, very specific memory of like how sticky the floor was. So, I don't know what made it sticky, but we're not going to go there. But it was really unlike anything I'd ever experienced before in my life. So I'm watching the band start. And the very first band goes on. Like I said, I did not know any of these bands. I had that compilation, and that was pretty much it. And I'm watching the first band, and almost every single person in the room was singing along to every word. And I was just like, oh, this is different. And people are moshing, but everyone's watching out for each other, and everything's kind of chaotic. And everyone was it felt very communal. And I realized I wasn't like watching a concert like that Smash Mouth show. More so it felt like I was kind of like watching a family reunion, and I really felt like I had just gotten my invite. That was middle school. I get to high school and start to see my friends starting to be in those bands that we would go see. These local shows starting to be more familiar, have familiar faces. And to me, that's always one of the really cool things about the scene is it's pretty insular. You kind of see the same people over and over, and it's very self-supporting. People really focus on contributing and giving back. So not just being in the bands, but like booking the shows, making the flyers, running the door, making merch, like literally like everything you can imagine, people try to keep within the community. And at that point, none of us were like making money. Everyone was just kind of doing it for the love. No one we knew had gotten famous or gotten rich off of this. And for me, the problem arose when I was like, okay, I'm in high school, I want to help, I want to contribute, but a few failed musical attempts proved that I have no musical talent, and there was kind of like enough people doing everything else. And I knew I wanted to give back. This thing was so important to me, this scene, and I was just like, how can I contribute? And then I wasn't sure. But then I realized my dad had a camera. So I knew that people were photographing shows in bigger cities. There's LA, there's New York. There's like incredible history of these scenes. But no one was really doing it in South Florida at the time. So I grabbed this very camera you see, the Canon S410. It has about 4 megapixels, which is a quarter of what's in your pocket. It was fine. It had like no manual controls. I was literally just pointing and shooting. But I brought it. And I didn't know any better. I didn't know how to do manual controls anyway. So I just started bringing it to every show. And those first photos, are very, very bad. Like, I could probably play it off as like, oh, this is my artistic purpose, but like, I'm not here to make myself look cool. Like, they were bad. All the bad things are by accident. But kind of the cool thing about being in the punk scene was everyone was just like stoked to have photos. You know, they were grateful that I was an additional person contributing to document something that they also cared about. So this little shitty camera kind of started everything for me. So here's some of those first photos. The band Smile, that is the very first band I ever photographed. That is in the back room of a bar in Delray Beach, Florida. I remember getting to that show when I was like, okay, I'm gonna bring my camera. And I was like kind of embarrassed. Like I didn't know, I didn't wanna like make a scene, and I put it in my cargo pants pocket because I was like, I don't want anyone to see it. And the thing that I was able to relax into was that there was no social media at the time. There was no photo sharing. So no one was gonna see the photos unless I wanted them to. So that kind of gave me a net to do my thing. And I just wanna go through a little of these photos. So you can see, these are captured. I managed to get a few great moments, but that's because it was interesting. You know, I was documenting the chaos of these shows. And what I would do after photographing these bands, like I said, there was no social media, I would email the photos to the bands. But then like MySpace came along and people were using them on their MySpace, which at the time was a very big deal. And people were really excited about the photos. Like I said, like they were just excited about the effort rather than them being perfect. And like, I do want to admit, like being the only one to take photos at these shows was really advantageous because I had no competition. But then, you know, as I learned more about photography and got more into it and kind of like started seeing like, oh, what works and what doesn't, I started joining photography message boards. So previously I'd been on punk message boards, I've been talking to people, I've been figuring out what I like, you know, figuring out following bands. And I asked them like, okay, how do you take pictures when it's dark and where, you know, everyone's moving very fast? And they kind of were just like, figure it out, just keep shooting, keep getting reps in. So it wasn't like a photography course, but it worked and I got better. So this is still that Canon S410, and I started bringing it to every show and people knew who I was and I got better. I started to understand the concept of lighting and editing. Before, I was not going through the photos. I was literally just turning over everything. And now, you know, at this point in time, I was culling it. I was making a more consistent gallery. And the bands embraced it even more, you know, started to be national bands that would come through. And even though they weren't great, these photos started getting used in different places. So that was really important to me. And photography kind of started to be my thing. And then so for my 18th birthday, I was gifted my first SLR camera. I assume there's some camera nerds out there, so for the ones that know, I started with a Rebel XT. Today I still shoot Canon, and the answer is because I started with Canon and I'm too lazy to change. But the upgrading gear, I got better. A little bit, you know, thanks to that gear upgrade, thanks to those controls, but I started to learn more and understand more about exposure and lighting and editing and, you know, kind of there's a rhythm to these shows and you'd be able to know, kind of predict when certain moments were about to happen. And then those bands, those photos were no longer just on MySpace. They're getting used on flyers, in albums, on t-shirts, all that stuff, which was, you know, really, really cool to me. And I was kind of becoming the photographer of the scene, you know? Like I said, there weren't really many people photographing these shows in Florida at the time. So then this is high school. And then in 2007, I graduated college and I moved to Boston. So this is me the week I moved to Boston, normal, cool guy. My very first week of living there, I got on a subway and went to Brockton, Massachusetts, which is probably the sketchiest suburb of Massachusetts. And moving from Boca Raton, even a little bit of sketch was more than, you know, I was used to. You know, I'm going to this show and there's a couple people that I knew there, but like only because their bands had come through Florida and I didn't really know what I was doing. You know, I was more or less walking through from the train station to the venue alone with my camera gear at night, but I did it. And I show up to this show and pretty much like immediately the community like took you in. You know what I mean? Where it's really, they know you're part of it. They know that you're going to contribute and that you're going to help. And like even 3,000 miles away from where I grew up and where I was used to photographing shows, like people were right there into it. They were like, get up on stage, start doing this, you know? And still to this day, like that very first show, I am still friends with a lot of those people, which is crazy to me. You know, that's a while ago at this point. And I can't explain, like there's definitely people here that I met through the scene, and even my wife, you know, I was able to find this community through our mutual passion. But then like before, you know, I got better. So I got to Boston in a time where Boston was kind of the focal point of the hardcore scene in the country. And there were bands like Have Heart and Bane that were blowing up, and everyone was looking for photos from Boston shows. And like I said, moving from South Florida where there weren't that many shows, I went to a place where there were like 3 to 5 good shows a week. And I was going to every single one of those shows and photographing every band at that show. And I got those reps in from the advice that I got earlier. And I like to think my work reflected that. You know, I'm capturing these authentic moments in these chaotic environments. And that's kind of been the theme through my work the whole time. You know what I mean? Where I'm now comfortable enough to get on stage. I'm invited to get up on stage. I'm right up in front. I'm much more comfortable and confident in myself. And my work improved simply due to some of that confidence. But after being in the scene and, you know, photographing so many shows, people started seeing me more than just like the show photographer. People started asking me to shoot other things. So promos for bands, which is like an obvious transition, but also like lifestyle photos for t-shirt companies, you know, headshots, pickle portraits, shout out Grillos. Eventually, you know, posting these non-show photos, someone came to me and was like, hey, could you shoot our wedding? And I had never been to a wedding at that point in my life, but I could figure it out. You know, that's the thing about coming from punk is like, I've been surrounded by people who just figured it out. You know, we gave our best, and these people, you know, they knew that they were taking a risk and they were willing to trust someone that they were comfortable with to take that risk. You know, I watched for years, watching my friends carve their own paths, like starting record labels, starting clothing lines, booking tours, all that crazy stuff. And without seeing that firsthand, you know, I don't think I would have had the confidence to give weddings a shot. So, my early weddings. The first wedding is the one right there in the middle, the one that's very brown. And that first wedding was kind of a culture shock to me. You know, it was a Cape Cod wedding, pretty fancy at that point in my life. That was, you know, one of the fancier things I'd been to. I show up to this wedding with like kind of my punk photography instincts, and I'm like, okay, like there's no stage, so like no one's gonna be stage diving, and like what actually is happening here? So I kind of like spent time trying to figure out like what will happen and what will change and how can I shoot this stuff. And you know, as you see here, there was still, I know it's probably hard to believe if you've only been a guest at a wedding, but I was still coming into weddings with the purpose of like capturing authenticity in chaotic moments. And weddings are chaos. If you only knew all the things I've seen. You know, most of my first weddings were really people from the scene. You know, you can look and see that these are people that I'd known from shows or bands or record labels. And this is 2010. Trends were very different. Please don't judge me. You know, and then I'm still in college at that point, and I'm shooting some weddings, and I get to graduate college, and I have enough weddings of my own that I can go off and do my own thing. You know, it was a risk, but it was one that I was willing to take. And, you know, it's like I said, this is 2010. So it's been 15 years since then. So again, like show photos, you get reps in, and I think I got better. My work now has taken me all over the US and to Japan twice and to Hawaii, and like I've really gotten to find a niche of people who are looking to trust someone to capture these authentic moments on the chaos that is their wedding day. There's so much stuff that happens that learning to photograph bands and people beating the shit out of each other in shitty venues made it easy to show up to a beautiful venue with gorgeous flowers and good-looking people and be comfortable right away. And again, my work improved. Please don't judge me from those last photos. Here's some more. And so it's been years since I've regularly photographed bands, but I do my best to bring those punk rock ethics into my work. Like I said, I've reinforced, it's about capturing authenticity. These weddings are chaotic, and my urge to be authentic and capture real moments like this still holds true today. And that's why couples have been, probably 400 plus couples at this point, continue to trust me. It's because of punk rock. And so it's been, 14 years of constant growth. And I've been fortunate to, like I said, never have a boss. And at this point, I think there's no going back. I can't imagine life any other way. So what I really want to reinforce, what I want everyone to go home with is, I started photographing punk shows just to belong somewhere, just to find myself. And I never thought about building a career. I was not going into it looking to grow a network or, schmooze, whatever. I was just showing up consistently and caring and contributing to this thing that was bigger than myself. Through those photos, through those shows, I really accidentally built a foundation for literally everything I have today. Like I said, my wedding clients trust me because I learned how to photograph in those types of situations. I have my photo booth business, make sure you go use it, because I was learning the hustle and getting out there and grinding. And then even my wife here in the front, we met because of shows. So that 13-year-old kid in the embroidered anarchy hat, because he went to a CD store and picked up a CD, I don't think he would have imagined this is where he would end up. And that was really the magic of community, is it doesn't just change you, but it changes who you become. So what I really want to send people home with, my finishing point is I want you to go out there and find your scene. It doesn't have to be punk, it doesn't have to be shows, it doesn't have any violence or whatever. But whether it's pottery classes or pickle portraits or literally whatever, the important thing, or creative mornings, the important thing is you show up and you contribute and you trust the process. Come in open-minded. The community that you find through these things might change your whole life. And thank you.
All right, we have some time for Q&A. If you have questions for Zac, now is the time to ask. Pepper it away.
Did you ever shoot someone's wedding and then years later shoot one of those people at their next wedding?
I had my first one last year. Yes, same bride, different groom. It was 10 years apart, and she upgraded, so it was great. Jim.
I listened to NPR, and there's a show in there called How I Built This, and Guy Raz is an amazing interviewer. He asks he's talking to CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, but he asks every interview, he asks at the end of it, how much of your success, your career, whatever you want to define it as, is due to dumb luck, and how much is due to, skill, talent, initiative, drive, and where do you sort of put the percentages of that if you hadn't walked into that store? You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. So again, I even went to college for marketing. I did not think this was going to become a career. I fully self-taught. I would say it's probably 20% luck, being in the right place at the right time, having that access to be the only photographer in South Florida, and then getting to Boston when, some of those photos are very well known, and I've seen them on t-shirts, people walking around in people's houses. So I was very much in the right place at the right time, but I could have just not done it. When my lens got broken and I had spent $1,000 of my own dollars, I could just be like, I'm good. I don't need to keep shooting bands. But I did, because it was really important to me. So I would say luck is always important. I definitely got there at the right place, right time, but I think I'm pretty proud that I kept it at it. I lost money doing, photographing these bands. I lost a lot of money, and I'm just happy to have helped, Thank you.
Thank you.
I have fun.
Do you have any stories of a crazy wedding event?
I should have put this photo in. So this is a question a lot of people ask me. I was photographing a wedding, and it was mid-ceremony, and the officiant that they had hired just like off Craigslist puked and shit himself.
What was the weird thing that happened?
There's a photo.
And listen, if you guys come through, if you use the danger booth, I will show you the photo. How's that? But yes, that is, up to that point, I was kind of like, oh, I've seen fights, I've seen this, I've seen, arguments, whatever. And that happened, and I was like, well, nothing tops it. And I have the photo of the bride recoiling, like just narrowly missing the puke.
Wow.
Right over here. Do you have more puke questions?
Actually, not. How do you keep yourself growing as a creative on your skills? Because you get to a point where you have done your career for a certain period of years.
Yeah.
You just kind of get comfortable with that. How do you keep growing and finding those new ways to?
For sure. That's a really good question. So I think the important part is finding the right moments, depending on what you do, to work for free or work on spec, because that's when you can take risks. I could do literally whatever I want when I shoot shows, because they did not pay me. And I was able to go from every show I was shooting with a flash on top of my camera. Okay, well, what if I put a cord and I was able to move the flash around? Okay, what if I set up flashes around the venue? Okay, what if I did no flash? Now cameras are getting better. Experimentation is really what pushed my work forward, you know what I mean? Learning what works. And then, film is great. Film is all the rage. But the beauty of digital is you can mess around and see exactly what you did. Apertures, all that stuff, like what exposure you were hitting, and what worked. And not only that, but showing what you're excited to do will get the right people to come to you to do that thing that you're excited to do.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Jordan.
Have you ever shot a naked wedding?
No, but I've never shot one. I've been requested to, and my wife said no.
Get into more detail of the request.
I asked if I had to be naked, and they said yes. And they also said they had to see me naked before to approve. I kept it going, even though I knew Becca said no, and I really wanted to do it just for the story, but I didn't. Sean.
If you could go back and do band photography for one band, who would bring you out of retirement?
Well, so my favorite band living in Boston was Half Heart. They were super important to me. Photographing their last show, if I go back, this photo in the middle, it's the one time I made money off band photography. I had all of my camera gear stolen, and I sold about $2,000 in prints of that photo. I still see it in people's houses. This is their very last show. This band reunited 5 years later, something like that, and I had not really been shooting bands. I came back, they played in front of 10,000 people, which for a hardcore band is insane. That was probably the biggest hardcore show to ever exist. That wasn't like a festival. So they actually reunited a second time, and instead of getting back behind the lens, I was like, oh, this is my favorite band, and I've never watched them. So I stage dove for the first time in my life at 34, 35. So yeah, other than that, there's definitely, I'm gonna say Floor Punch. That's my easy answer, but thank you.
Is there a OG punk band from the 70s that was defunct before you started that you would want to photograph if you ever?
So the thing about that is they've started to reunite, and now they're old men. I love Black Flag. Do I need to see elderly Black Flag? in their heyday, if I could have seen Minor Threat and watched Ian lose his shit and yell at people for not drinking soda, you know, that's, I didn't talk about it too much, but like finding straight edge was like such a big part of my life, and I'm still straight edge as an adult, which is very cool.
What's straight edge? No, I'm kidding.
Not drinking coffee.
Do you think there's an interesting parallel between weddings and like having a photographer, and they say don't take photos on your cell phone, to punk rock shows? Should bands say don't take photos on your cell phone, we have a professional photographer here? And has cell phones ruined punk rock shows?
So at this point in my career, when I was shooting shows in like 2008, there's a million fests now. Back then there was like 2 fests. And that was the first time they started having to create photo passes at hardcore shows, because everyone, not cell phone cameras weren't there yet, but everyone was just grabbing an SLR and getting on stage. And it was too much, because half the people you never saw their photos and half the people you didn't know who they were. Yes, you go to a concert now and all you see is cell phones. I'm like, what are you doing? I think take a quick photo. I think that's fine. Everyone should document, but like, you don't need to videotape. Put your phone away. Take a quick shot. You know, it is really nice when you go to places. You know, I got very lucky to be invited to Epic Universe before photos were allowed, and it was very out of character for me to not take photos at a theme park, and I kept reaching for my phone, and I was like, oh, I could actually just like absorb all of this. I don't think it's ruined shows. I think there's certain things that bands do now just for TikTok that has maybe not been great for shows, but you know, it is what it is. Times change, and you know, the scene has to evolve with it.
Did you buy that first CD you mentioned at the beginning?
Yes.
Do you still have it?
No. No. I've moved many times, and like eventually like my record collection is gone, my CDs, like that would be cool. That I thought about rebuying that Power Shot just to like feel like it's here. I don't need more shit.
The importance of doing stuff for free when you're learning.
Yeah.
I've often had young people come up to me and say, should I give my stuff away? Or, you know, because, you know, I'm hurting the industry, or I need the money, or whatever. The power of doing something for nothing while you're learning. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so
freedom that comes with that?
yeah, like I said, it really opens you up because you owe the person nothing. You know, and if they're just hiring you to walk around a room taking like photos of people standing together, that's not helping you. That's not helping anything. They're going to tell you they'll rehire you, and let me tell you something, they're not. That never happens. I've been doing this a long time, and I've literally never worked for free and had that person who asked me to work for free start paying me. You know, even giant corporations. But yeah, so yeah, working for free frees you up. You know, getting to do, I have friends that early on in their like graphic design career would just like make band shirts on spec. And, you know, just be like, hey, I made this. If you guys want to use it, let me know. If not, I made it. I made it for fun. So yeah, I think there is power in working for free, but also don't get tricked. You know, don't let people dick you around. But most of the time, you know, hurting the industry, someone who's looking to hire someone to do something for cheap or free isn't going to pay a premium. Unfortunately, they will find someone, you know, but you don't need to be that person.
But also the power of building your skills and your,
for sure.
your portfolio.
Yeah.
So that you can say, look what I can do.
Yes, exactly.
Nobody's going to hire someone who can't show what they can do.
Yeah, it's really hard to get anything without proof of work. But yeah. Anyone else?
No. You touched on it earlier, but I was curious if you can go a little deeper as to your different approaches when you're doing something live, like a live event versus something a little bit more controlled.
Yeah.
Like a wedding. And because I know a lot of photographers, when we have them speak, they talk about the story that they're trying to tell or how they're trying to tell the story. And I was wondering if you can talk a little bit about how you tell those different stories.
Yeah. So I could even, you know, show you the difference here. At shows, I'm literally just there. I'm there to capture. I'm not there to create. It's a very, very different skill than some studio photographers who show up with a big concept and do this incredible work. This is more of documentary style work. You know, with it evolving into this, I got more control. You know, I was able to move things around and have a say and take my time versus like the bands would play for 15 minutes. You know, there was not a ton of time to figure things out. You would actually, I remember in the early shows, I would shoot the opener and my photos would slowly get better as the show went on because I was figuring out new venues. So, and then getting back to these, like, this is a real happy medium of, you know, on the left there, that happened. I was just there. I happened to capture that moment between a bride and a groom. But stuff like, you know, portraits, you're able to understand how the day feels. I show up, I have no say in what a wedding is. You know, I'm there, I want people to do whatever. I've learned at this point, people should just literally do whatever they want at a wedding. You know, I definitely used to be like, oh, it has to have all these details and it has to do all this. It's like, no. Like what matters is it's true to them. And so capturing stuff is still my move, but it's creating the environment for moments to happen naturally. You know, back here, we look at, you know, these bridesmaids and like, I was just like, get together. And naturally they were like hugging. I knew they'd be together. I was there at the moment and I caught something real.
So then
Yeah.
So then to the punk shows, with the weddings, the focus is on the wedding party for the most part, but with the punk shows, there seems to be like stories going on all around. How much of your shots are focusing on the band and how much of your shots are focusing on the audience and that interaction?
Yeah.
Do you have any good stories about
Truthfully, I was always the one who shoots the band. I like didn't, you know, there's people in this world that shot moshing and shoot the crowd interaction. My non-band photos are when I was hanging around between bands and dicking around with friends. I don't know if maybe it was like high and mighty, but like I was just like, if people are in the crowd, you know, people are getting up there. This is naturally what happens at hardcore shows, is people interact, and that's still capturing the band within the scene. You know what I mean? Within the scene in front of you, not the punk scene. But, you know, the beauty of capturing shows over concerts, you know, I have friends that are concert photographers. You're in a photo pit and you have 3 songs and that's it. You know, once people knew who I was, they were like, oh, literally just do whatever. And I could, you know, walk between the drummer, and I started getting more comfortable versus those earlier ones where I was like standing in the crowd, just like, but does that kind of answer? Yeah. Cool. Yeah, and crazy stories, I mean, I've seen a lot of stuff. I did have one, I don't know if anyone remembers the show Miami Inc., but a dude who was on that show tried to push me off a stage once. Anyone else? No?
This is more a comment than
Yeah.
a question. Stage dive at a wedding next.
When you renew your vows, I'll stage dive.
Stage dive right now.
No, thank you. I gotta limber up. I gotta stretch.
Where are you getting most of your work from these days?
These days, I mean, people knowing me, it's a lot of, the nice thing about shows and weddings is people see you work. Weddings themselves are like proof of concept, and with most weddings, there's 100+ people there watching you do your thing and then asking their friend, oh, how was it? Or can I see the photos? And they're like, oh, well, I know you're good. When I meet with a couple who has seen me at a wedding, I would say they book 90% of the time because they know exactly what they're getting. As far as what?
Are they aware of your punk?
You know, it's funny because early on there was, since everyone was coming from the scene, I had a lot, and this is like, you know, before everyone had tattoos everywhere. I was photographing a lot of tattooed couples, and someone emailed and was like, hey, we really like your work, but like we don't have any tattoos. Like, will you still photograph us? And I was like, yeah, of course. It's just like, you know, I wasn't in the more traditional wedding world yet. And I think what I really try to is show kind of that punk rock vibe in my photos. The way I think it shows the clearest is the dancing photos. The way I learned shutter drag with bands and like getting right up in their faces, I do that wedding still. You know, we're in a great time for weddings where there's always like a 5-song pop punk like montage in the middle of a wedding. And I'm like, oh, I'm just shooting a show again. You know, it feels very reminiscent. But yeah, does that answer your question? Cool.
Did you shoot any non-punk music shows? And how do they differ?
One time, I think one time, maybe that was it. I got hired by Vice to shoot the Dirty Projectors when they were just starting out, when they released that like Black Flag cover album. And I was like, this band is weird, and now they're huge, so good for them. But yeah, I mean, like I said, the big difference between a show and a concert is at a concert, you're truly like in a pit, and 90% of the time you have 3 songs. And that's like that's 9 minutes at most. And like the cool stuff doesn't usually happen during the first 3 songs. So I never strived to do that. I knew that wasn't what I wanted to shoot, but you know, oh, you know what? So sometimes I also photograph corporate events for our photo booth company. And I did shoot Macklemore last year. I shot Macklemore performing in front of 300 people, but because it was a corporate event, I could do whatever I wanted. I was up front, I was climbing stairs, I was literally wherever. They were like, just do your thing. And that was fun. I was like, that's not really my thing. Great performer. Great, incredibly photogenic performer.
How'd you come up with the name Danger Booth?
So in 2012, I started the photo booth company on my own as like an extension of my wedding business. And I literally just like kept spitting out names. And that one's the one that stuck. And like the answer I give at like events, we're like, why is it dangerous? Like, oh, it's full of bees. People are always like, ha. But like very fortunately, you know, as the business has grown, as Becca came on with me, we go to events, we go to things, and they're, you know, they could be like, this is just like branding. It's just like, people be like, oh yeah, go to the photo booth. They go, no, go to the Danger Booth. The Danger Booth is here. Not the photo booth guy, the Danger Booth guy. And I got really lucky. I don't envy anyone who has to name a business in 2025 because every URL is taken. I'm sorry.
So I think it's like really inspirational how you went from that guy in the crowd to like people reaching out to you for like specific events. I was wondering if there's anything you change about your process from like the beginning where you picked up the CD to where you are now, but specifically like how you marketed yourself. Like is there anything you would change?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, early on, I definitely had some. I mean, marketing wise, the funny thing is I should have put it in there, but I had some really crazy logos, some really, really bad logos, and that's just fun. But, you know, I would say that marketing wasn't what I was concerned about until I started shooting non-show stuff. I am so blessed to have a memorable name. You know, my name is something people remember. People use my full name and it sticks out. It's maybe the one good thing my parents did. And, you know, I wasn't thinking about marketing. I truly thought I was going to graduate college and work in an ad agency. I did not, it was something I did for fun, and I would shoot other stuff for like some side cash, you know, some of those other things, the stuff for Grillos, the stuff for t-shirt brands. I was just like, oh yeah, I could make money to cover the money I spend shooting bands. So early on in weddings, what I'm going to tell you for weddings and probably most creative fields is paying for advertising is probably the biggest waste of your money. I definitely spent thousands of dollars in, you know, to be on The Knot or to be on Wedding Wire or something like that. Having great ad campaigns is a whole nother thing, but just paying to get your name on a list, it's a waste. You could be investing that money into hiring good creative people to make logos, to do something interesting that's going to make you stand out.
Time for one last question.
What's your best piece of advice for someone who's looking to photograph shows and get their start?
Yeah. So the nice thing about shows is you don't need a media pass. You just show up with a camera. The thing that I've seen firsthand is a third party being like, oh, those look cool, I'll go take pictures. And when someone who's not part of the scene shows up and starts photographing it and starting to use the scene as content, that feels very disingenuous. You know, like I've been talking to other photographers who are like, yeah, man, I'd like love to come like do portraits at one of those things. Like, why? Like you're not welcome. Like you want to come see the band, you want to come buy a shirt, like please come, but like you're gonna come like think you're some hot shit. Like we're here already. So I would say like figure out what shows or other things you are already a part of before you start thinking about how you can photograph them. You know, like coming from guy who was already at every show, they knew me. Transitioning to getting on stage with my camera was not that big of a deal, you know? But yeah. So yeah, it's just about embracing that scene, embracing the community.
All right. Great. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you.